Hey, this is Teddy. We left off in that last cold hardy video on this Sable, Louisiana. So it's hard to see, but it's like flowing over on top of itself, creates this like canopy because it's jammed into the corner right there. And you can see it's starting to definitely build up a trunk right there. And there's like this canopy of leaves on it that comes over and protects it. This thing doesn't take any winter damage here in Middle Tennessee, and I would definitely think that this thing's going to be hardy up into Kentucky and even southern Ohio, no problem. Yeah, that's going to get really big. It'll start pushing the trunk out on it. Maybe get 8 to 10 feet overall when it's, maxed out in height. So we'll just keep moving up the wall here. So right next to it, that's a Sable Birmingham. That got pretty much completely defoliated last winter when we went to -4 Fahrenheit, and then we're below freezing for a whole week. So this year we went to 3 degrees Fahrenheit was our maximum low, but we were also below freezing for a week, and it's got some spotting on some of the leaves, and you can see some of the older tips took some damage. But that thing is starting to build up a base on it too. We'll call it maybe a trunk in the next year or two. But this is one that there's a guy that a few people I know this guy, and he lives in Texas, like somewhere in North Texas. But he had a Birmingham that had like a 4-foot above ground trunk on it. I've seen pictures of it, and they went to like -14 and were below freezing for almost 2 weeks, I think. And it completely defoliated, but it sprouted back. And that's what people usually will argue back and forth about, if the growing point on a palm is above ground, like a trunking palmetto, for example, or even like Trachycarpus, windmill palms, or even a Birmingham like this, that if it has an above ground trunk, it's way less cold hardy. Well, obviously that one lived and resprouted and has a full head on it now. So these are pretty hardy, and a lot hardier than I think people give them credit for. So you can see a little minor right there. That is a dwarf minor. So that's a smaller version of that bigger dwarf minor I showed you guys in the first video. So I've got a whole row of these going up this hill here that I'll show you. But right in front of the Birmingham there in the middle is that's a Yucca gloriosa variegata. So it's a variegated Yucca gloriosa. That's a natural hybrid between a Yucca allifolia and a Yucca filamentosa. So this one's a variegated form, so obviously that was intervened with by human hands. But I've got a green one up the hill that I'll show you. And this thing is really, really hardy. And it gets a big massive head of leaves on it, and they'll flower. You can collect seed, and they will gain a big trunk. This one behind those 2 heads had a 4-foot trunk with 3 heads on it. But last year when we went to -4 and then came out of it, the heads looked great. There was some leaf damage, but then I went and felt the trunk, and it got a little mushy. So we ended up having to cut the trunk off. But obviously these ones closer to the ground stayed healthy, and they grew, and there's a little pup under there. And usually there's 2 or 3 new ones that come up. You can dig out and move them around. But I think I've got 3 or 4 of these in the yard in different places. So behind that, in that corner, so this is literally your cold hardy palm. That's a Sable minor, McCurtain County. So it's from McCurtain County, Oklahoma, and these grow wild there. And in nature, these have seen -21, so they claim, Fahrenheit. And it's a natural stand of them, and they obviously have lived for however long, millions of years, and keep producing, keep living. So this is people obviously collected seed and started new plants from seed, and that's what that's what this one is. But this has never been phased by any cold that we've had here. We usually get really bad ice storms, so even if we don't get cold damage, we'll get spotting on leaves from it just being covered in ice. That plants just don't like that. But this sees no spotting, no tip damage, nothing. So this, I would definitely claim that it is hardy very far north of here. The only caveat would be is that it needs heat and sun to grow really good in the summer, build up its sugars, and kind of give it that winter immunity. So I would highly advise planting it against your foundation if you're up into northern Kentucky, into Ohio, Pennsylvania, Western Virginia, stuff like that. This is definitely the one you want to plant, but you may need to give it some protection the first few winters. But it should perform marvelously, and you can have palm trees up there. So right next to it, this one that's looking pretty banged up, that is a sable palmetto. So I am determined to grow sable palmettos here. This is what got me really into palm trees, was going to Florida. And as you just drive south, you'll just sporadically start seeing a palm tree in people's yards, and seeing an agave and big yuccas, and you know, palmetto's just that perfect southeastern, you know, native palm that trunks and gets huge. But this one was completely unprotected this year, so it's got a lot of damage on those leaves that you can see that are brown, but the leaf that is still standing up in green is good to go. There's one behind it that's kind of intermixed with that McCurtain back there that has a lot of green, and there's the one that's growing there has a lot of green. So I'm feeling hopeful for this, and I'm just gonna keep planting them until I get one to stick, because that is the thing that if you have one palm that dies, that does not necessarily mean that it is not hardy for your area. You definitely should always plant two. I always recommend, which I do, I plant two of everything no matter what. Because just being in a different sitting, in a little different microclimate in your yard, getting hit with sun at a different time of the day, different amount of moisture, drainage in the soil, nutrient content, all of it plays a big factor in whether a palm will survive or not when it reaches its absolute limit. And then from plant to plant, it's just like people. Some are stronger than others, some are bigger than others, some are different colors than others. And this is in the same seed batch that can come from the same palm tree. You'll get ones that are a lot, not a lot, but can be cold hardier than the one right next to it. So I think I've got 5 or 6 palmettos around the yard, and I'm just gonna keep planting them until I get one that sticks. So here in front of it, that's a smaller Sable Louisiana, like that one that's jammed into the corner down there. Again, this thing takes no damage. It's just young. This will keep getting bigger, obviously, and I'll pick seeds off of this and start them and sell them to all of you. So there's another little dwarf sable miner back there. There's another one there, there, and there. I planted like a whole row of these. All these take no damage, but I really do like that they're a smaller version, especially that, you know, they're in front of this wall like this. They're not gonna block a lot of other plants' views when they're just at their full size. So let's look at some more palms back here, and then we'll look at this desert bed. So that is a big lavender that we've had in the ground, and I really like that. That's maybe zone 7A might be about its limit. I think there's a couple lavender species that will go further north. I'm not sure what they are right now. So that is a Trachycarpus wagnerianus, waggy palm. This got completely defoliated last winter. Even though I wrapped it, I didn't provide it with any heat. I'm just trying to get this guy going before I leave it on its own. So I wrapped it again this winter because it didn't have a whole bunch of leaves on it, and you can see that it took a lot of damage. All these leaves were fully green when I wrapped it. But it does have a lot of green on it. It spears solid. It doesn't feel like it's gonna spear pull, at least for now. But we're getting warmer temperatures, so I got to keep checking it and see. But this definitely, you know, survived last winter's crazy cold, and you know, this year I covered it, so I'm not completely convinced that this thing's gonna stick here, but I definitely do want to get a windmill palm to stick here. I've probably killed 7 or 8 of them over the years now. And I've got another 2 waggies that I'm gonna plant. I think one I'm gonna plant this year, and one was still pretty small. Keep that in a pot, but I think that's the way to go with a waggy. This right next to it is a sable brazoria. I got this at Gary's Nursery. I got a bunch of palms from there at Gary's Nursery, but this thing took a lot of damage last year, and it took a lot of damage this year, but it's got, you know, basically a 60-70% good leaf there, and then that spear is good. So I don't know, we're gonna keep playing with this. I think I've got 7 other brazorias planted in the yard, and a lot of those smaller ones look a lot better than this one, so that can just be you know, the difference in plant to plant hardiness. But we're gonna just keep growing them, and we'll see what sticks and what doesn't. And when one dies, it doesn't hurt my feelings, honestly. It used to, when I used to only have a couple palms, but now it really doesn't affect me, because like, let's say that brazoria dies, that's a perfect spot to start another palm. So it's just opened me up and letting me continue gardening without really having to expand into other parts of my yard. So we've done what, some yuccas, some cactus. There's that big opuntia. I definitely recommend planting opuntias, because if you're not familiar with cactus, this thing will stand up and be about maybe 4 feet tall. Some years it'll get to 5 feet tall. The branches just get really heavy, and when they start getting a little flimsy in the wintertime, when the cold hits it, it'll just lay down. And that's how it kind of naturally spreads too, because the pads will root into the ground wherever they touch. But my point is, this thing gets covered in yellow flowers, I think around June time here, which is it's just gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. I can't tell you how pretty cactus flowers are if you're not aware, but get some opuntias in the ground, put them in your landscape. They're really, really beautiful. So we've done yuccas, palms, some cactus. Now let's look at some agaves. So this big bad boy in the back is Agave ovatifolia. It's a whale's tongue agave, so they call it. So again, all this cold that I'm telling you guys about, that you see all this damage on all these palms, this thing takes no damage. It just sits here. It takes all of our moisture, no problem. It just sits here. This is definitely, so they say, really hardy to zone 7A. I don't know how much further north it could go. Maybe to 6B, but you might have to just cover it for really cold spells in the wintertime. But here, this is one that will get very big. This is not full grown yet. It will go 5 feet to 6 feet wide, 3 to 4 feet tall before it flowers. So I've got 2 of those. This is a really good agave to plant. Before I go any further, you'll notice that all these are raised beds, right, that I've been showing. So this was just out of necessity because this is on a hill. So I wanted to make different garden beds. But when I got up to this one, I wanted to make a desert garden bed only. So I built this retaining wall, and it's completely filled with just coarse sand, gravel, and literally maybe 10 to 15% bagged topsoil. But this thing drains really good and wicks the winter moisture, and that is what is going to be the key to getting your desert plants to survive where they do have cold. They do not want to be wet in the wintertime. This is like utmost key to getting them to survive. Cold is not even the problem. It is literally the moisture that will get them every single time. And I'll show you exactly why. People claim that this here is Agave utahensis. This is reportedly the hardiest agave you can grow, but they don't like moisture. Well, this is sitting right next to an avatifolia that does like moisture, or it'll at least tolerate it. But I planted this did not get covered this winter at all. So it took the cold, no problem. But what it also did was it took the moisture, because after the cold, we got blasted with, I think literally over a week and a half, we must have gotten 3 inches of rain. And there's just no damage on it. So it's small, and it'll get bigger, but I've got, I don't know, 2 other utahensis planted, and I've got a couple in pots. I'm gonna plant some more this year. But just high and dry is the key, and you will get it to grow. So in here, there's a bunch of little hens and chicks all over the place, and like different succulents and stone crops, I believe you call all of these families, that are planted all in here. There's a rosemary that took some damage, but we had one in a different spot in the yard that lived for, I don't know, 4 years, and this one doesn't look as bad as some of those, or some of the winters it would come out of the other one, and that survived. So I've got high hopes for this. I hope it does survive. So there's a couple other little things in here. There's a little Echinocerius vidriflorus. You can barely even see it because it like sucks down into the soil. There's a Cylindropuntia snow leopard, a little piece off of the other one that I showed you in another video. There's a Puntia dark night. That one stays purple all year round. That's a cool one. So here is an Agave Perii truncata. So I had thought this survived and was really good. It survived last winter with that cold and showed no damage with just a flower pot over it. So I got, I guess, maybe a false sense of confidence with this and left it uncovered this year. It did well with the cold, didn't show any damage, but then when we got all that moisture, now this thing is feeling really loose and sloppy in here. Yes, I can see it oozing in there. Let's see if you can see. Yeah, there's just like juice coming out of it. So that's a sure sign that thing is a goner. Well, that's all right. We'll dig it up and we'll plant another agave in there. And we've got a bunch in pots that are a lot hardier, and we'll just keep going. So there's a Cylindropuntia spinosaur. So that was a bit, I bought it at that size and planted it, and it's just not as hardy as imbricata. I think there's some different, more northern forms of that Spinosaur that will grow in colder regions, but this one just is clearly not one of them. That died last winter, and I just didn't have the heart to dig it up yet. I was hoping it would come back, but this will be the spring. We'll dig it up and we'll put something else cool there. So let's see, here's that other avatifolia. So those are about the same size. They just, I don't know, I love them. Every time I pull down the driveway when I get back from work, I just stop and check them out because I love them. So let's see. This one actually put out 2 pups. So there's one that took some damage this winter, and there's another one. So these are not supposed to pup, they're supposed to be solitary. But a guy that knows a lot more about agaves than I do said that if plants go into tissue culture, if you got your agave that was tissue cultured, it has a tendency to pup even if they are solitary. So that's probably the reason for that. Right behind it there, that's a yucca harmony. It's the Harriman's yucca. It's a dwarf yucca. So it'll get maybe just a little bit bigger than that, and it'll just have a full head of leaves, and then it'll end up flowering, but won't get too much taller or bigger than that, which is really cool. That's why I put it in there. It's really small. There's a little Echinocerius triglodatus, and that thing looks like it's dead, but it is not. It will beef right back up in the springtime, and I hope it will multiply more this year, put a couple more heads on it, because it does not look great though, but it is alive, I promise you. Right behind that yucca harmony, that is a yucca alifolia magenta magic. That's a Plant Delights introduction, and it's got some damage on it, which is, you know, typical for an alifolia, and especially that one because it's a it's a different colored leaf form. Like green forms are generally going to be your hardier plant, and then your different color variations are going to be a little bit less hardy. There's a couple exceptions with some different kinds of plants, but generally speaking that's the case. But it's got a little bit of damage, but it'll be all right. So right behind that is a yucca faxoniana. That took a little bit of damage last winter. Probably not even so much because of the cold, but probably just because of the moisture that we had. But it took no damage this winter, and it is just growing so dang slow. Cannot wait for that to get bigger and just kind of take over that area back there. So here, let's keep going. Right here's a yucca, or an agave Tormeyana bella. So this is Tormeyana is a small like agave, but it has these white lines on it, which kind of looks like a Victoria Reginae. But this took little minor damage this winter, but this was its first winter, completely uncovered. So I'll say that one's hardy here. We'll see what it does. There's a couple little dwarf opuntias there, another hens and chicks. Here's an agave Perii Cusii. So this is you know, first winter in the ground, and it's pretty small, but it's got, you know, minor little leaf damage on it. But that thing will be rock solid hardy and grow out of it no problem. So there's another yucca rostrata. I grew that from seed also. This was down actually next to the big Sable, Louisiana, and I did not amend the soil that I planted that in. I planted that in pure clay, and I didn't water it, but it just suffered, and it grew so slow. So this is like a perfect example of, you've got to give plants what they want. Just because you give plants more water doesn't mean they're going to grow. That only applies for plants that like more water. A plant that likes less water, like this, had the opposite effect of what you would think. It grew slower and it's dwarfed and stunted. So I dug that out of that spot and put it into this, this, you know, I don't know, big desert scape up here, rock garden. And now it is recovered. It's looking healthier, and hopefully when this thing gets really tall, we don't have people getting into accidents gawking at it in our front yard. But right next to it, that's a yucca rigida. Yeah, I showed that bigger one that's down in the yard. This one, you know, this is like the west side of our house too, so it gets less sun than that one that gets full sun down there. So that's another thing. If you've got part day sun versus full sun, you'll get slower growth and sometimes less winter hardiness for plants that really need that sun. So here's another Cylindropuntia imbricata. This is like a little different form than the other one. I don't even know how to describe it. I guess it's more of a bush type. It's probably going to be more lower growing before the branches decide to break or topple off, or it just gets out too far into the driveway and I've got to cut it back. But it's cool too. Like to have different forms of the same plant. It's kind of hard to see in here with the sun. Let me go around to the other side. But here's a big yucca filamentosa. That's like a southeast native to Tennessee. I got to keep pruning this back and pulling the old heads off of it each year because it keeps drowning everything. Like here's a little variegated yucca under it. I'm not sure exactly which cultivar that is, but I like that too. Keep going around. Here's a smaller Hesperello parviflora. I know you can't really see it very good because I can't see it very good right now either, but on the other side you can see it even less. But those are cool. They put up flower stalks, flower these really cool red flowers all summer and fall, and they're really hardy, so that's another cool one. So and there's another Yucca gloriosa variegata. That's a small one. It's getting drowned by the filamentosa, but I'll just prune it back and hopefully that one gets big. Here's a little lavender plant. That one, I'm not seeing any green. That might have kicked the bucket. So there's a little dwarf Alberta spruce, I think it was. So we don't get Christmas trees, or if we do, we bought this as our Christmas tree one year, but it was solely in the purpose that we could plant it, you know, after, in which we did, and it stays really small. So like evergreens are really cool in rock gardens too. So you gotta, you know, I'm gonna keep filling in with more of those over the years. Here's something really cool. Here's a Dasylirian Laophyllum. So it's like a desert spoon, but they've got these really spiky leaves on them. So like most people are more familiar with the Dasylirian Wheeleri. That's like the most common. This one, its first winter was last winter, and I forgot to protect it, and it took absolutely no damage. And then obviously this winter was way better than last, and it took absolutely no damage. So this is definitely a keeper here. I need to get some more of these and plant some more. So I had a yucca elata there, and I dug that up because it wasn't really doing well. And then decided to plant two penstemons in there. Those are like drought tolerant, dry land, almost desert scape flowering plants. Those are pretty cool. So here's a Yucca recurvifolia. That thing's really hardy here. It has like softer more flexible leaves, but that thing will get a trunk on it too. So then behind it is that's a Yucca gloriosa, but a green form. That thing has a little bit of spotting on some of the older leaves, but all the newer foliage looks really good. Really excited for that to get big. And then just this whole front area just to be this dry land desert scape garden up here. I really like messing with rock gardens, and I'm gonna keep doing that. But I guess this is a long drawn out video enough. I'll do another one later. Thanks for watching.